The video toaster is a pretty phenomenal device. It's kind of the Ginsu knife of video appliances.
The critical part is preparing ahead of time, both for your offline session, okay, meaning ahead of what you're doing, and during the offline for the online.
If it's not shot well, it wouldn't matter if you had a $40,000 Betacam or a $1,200 camera. It's still not shot well.
Being exposed to anybody that has had more experience than you in any areas is always a great eye-opener. For the average, whether you're in a business or you're just a home computer artist, to be able to look over the shoulders of artists such as myself or Siegel or Sachs is, I think, one of the most wonderful things about our video age, is that we can get these first-hand experiences and save ourselves. I mean, it's taken me 5 years to learn certain things. I'm going to teach you that in 1 minute.
This is desktop video. For many people, it's the renaissance of the video medium. Television is the most common form of communication today, and desktop video is making headlines around the world. The most exciting aspect of DTV is the merging of professional and amateur equipment, and the ability for anyone with desire and creativity to access the world of television. This edition of Desktop Video will introduce you to a variety of equipment, techniques, and opportunities that will enhance your abilities to work in the world of video. When people discuss video, they often bring up tape formats. In the past, tape format was an important clue regarding the quality and style of a video production. If someone said they were producing a show on 1 inch, everyone knew it was professional. On the other hand, if they mentioned half-inch, professionals assumed that it was an amateur show or just another home video. Today, almost everything you've heard about formats needs to be reevaluated. Of course, there are a few formats that are still considered top-of-the-line broadcast formats. These include D1, D2, D3, and 1 inch. These formats have tremendous costs associated with them, so only broadcast facilities currently utilize them. There are a number of other formats to consider. These include Betacam SP, 3/4 inch SP, High 8, Super VHS, ED Beta, VHS, and 8mm. We decided to investigate tape formats in order to learn about their strengths and weaknesses. We set up a photo shoot with a variety of cameras and recorders in order to capture a scene and compare the results. We recorded the same scene from the same location in order to make the comparison as accurate as possible. Further, each sequence, once recorded, was bumped onto Betacam SP so that the comparisons are made with a single generation loss. This sequence is Betacam SP. Most people are now using Betacam SP for professional and broadcast video production. This is 3/4 inch SP. Typically, 3/4 inch is used in electronic news gathering and education. It is also used for offline production work. This is High 8 footage, gathered with a 3-chip industrial camera. High 8 began life as a consumer format, but is now finding a home in almost every form of professional video work as well. This footage is High 8 shot with a consumer Sony camera. During the past few years, High 8 has become the format of choice for serious home videographers. This is regular 8mm. This is the format of choice for price-conscious or occasional home videographers. This is SVHS. Developed as a semi-pro format, it has fallen behind High 8 in popularity, but is still used in cable and industrial applications as well as in consumer uses. Now, let's take a look at a direct comparison between formats. This is a Betacam SP image on the left. Now let's add a 3/4 inch SP image on the right. Overall, they're similar, but Betacam has better contrast and resolution. Now let's take a look at the same sequence with Betacam SP on the left and High 8 on the right. Although there is a difference, it's amazing to note the overall quality of High 8. Here are a few other variations. Take a look and judge for yourself. By the way, we didn't record in ED Beta or regular VHS, as those formats aren't widely used for most desktop video applications. Perhaps the most interesting aspect of this test can be traced back to the footage when viewed independently. Is this footage High 8? Or maybe it's SVHS? Of course, it might be Betacam SP. The point we're making is that format is difficult to distinguish without direct comparison or a highly trained eye. In our experience, we found that High 8 is an excellent medium that relates most closely to Betacam. High 8 footage is showing up on CNN, in music videos, and in other broadcast applications. High 8 has improved signal-to-noise ratios over other consumer and semi-pro formats, and it utilizes an extremely high clip level, meaning that pictures are sharp and transfer to another reel of tape with good definition. Deciding on a format can be confusing. The video industry moves quickly, so finding the right match is important. You won't want to repurchase equipment every few months, as some of us have in the past. So it's important to develop some requirements for your work.
High 8 is a interesting format. I like it very much. When I was with NewTek, we used High 8 for just about everything we did in-house. I prefer High 8 to Super VHS for many reasons. It's portability, and my eyes see a better quality in High 8 than SVHS.
Getting the right format equipment is important for another reason as well. Video production is an emotional business. If you don't feel good about your equipment, it may affect your decision-making process, thereby impacting on the quality of your show.
When you're out in the public, anything can happen. In fact, having a consumer camera can be a real asset sometimes, because you can go out in the public and look like a tourist. If you go out there with a Betacam, that doesn't, especially to a lot of people, they don't look like consumer cameras. They either assume that you're with some TV channel, and they'll frequently ask which channel you're from, or they'll maybe want to see your press pass. And you may not be able to get the shots that you want. You go out with a high quality camera like a High 8 or a Super VHS, the camera may look like a consumer camera that any tourist would have, but it would still allow you to shoot the shots, bring them back, and use them.
There is another way to work with video. You can rent equipment. Renting is an excellent option when shooting something your own equipment might not capture with the style or quality you need. Renting is an excellent way to upgrade your image without writing large checks. For example, this is a Sony M7 camera. To purchase this camera, you would write a check for approximately $12,000. On the other hand, you can rent it for an average of $300 a day. For many people, the idea of renting is not popular. It's easy to reason that a product, such as the Sony M7, can be leased for about $600 a month, making it available every day of the week. On the other hand, if you lease, you'll have that product every day of the week for an average of 4 years, by which time you'll see a dozen other cameras you'd love to get your hands on. Here's a good rule to consider when deciding on lease purchase versus renting. If you rent it more than 5 times a month, then a lease purchase makes sense. If you rent less than 5 times a month, renting is a more economical and up-to-date way to go. There are many ways to build a desktop video system. A simple system might be a camcorder and a recorder. Add a computer and you can create some titles and backgrounds. For more sophisticated work, you'll need to do some planning. The type of system you build will depend on the type of work you do. If you create animations, then a camera and multiple VCRs might not be important. If shooting weddings is your primary income, then you'll need a full edit system and titling. Here's a sample DTV system for the serious videographer. Included is a video toaster system, a Sony EVO 9700 editing system, an IDEN time-based corrector for the primary video source, a personal TBC for a secondary video source, such as a camcorder, several monitors, and a stereo Tascam 644 mixing system. This DTV system will allow you to create frame-accurate shows that include stereo sound, video, titling, graphics, animations, special effects, and more. Computer-based editing creates two products. The first is a list of each edit to be cut into the video. The second is the actual video product. In order to find specific frames of video information, a numbering system is used called timecode. Timecode is one of the most important breakthroughs in modern video production, as it allows you to make minute changes and perfect matches of different or similar video or audio data. In the United States, timecode follows standards set forth by the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers and is often referred to as SMPTE timecode. In Europe, the standard is set by the European Broadcast Union and is called EBU timecode. Timecode documents the hour, minute, second, and frame found on each reel of videotape. Timecode doesn't appear magically. It must be recorded on the tape. If the camera or recorder being used in the field has a timecode generator, timecode can be written to the tape in the field while the production is shot. If there isn't a field generator available, there are a variety of devices that will write timecode in the studio. There are several types of timecode to consider. First of all, let's share a secret many people don't know about video. Did you know that video isn't really 30 frames per second? It's true. Video is actually 29.97 frames per second. What does this mean? Well, in reality, it means that video time doesn't match clock time. At the end of 1 hour of clock time, 1 hour, 3 seconds, and 18 frames of video will have passed. That's an error of 108 frames. In this mode, timecode is called non-drop frame timecode. Now, enter drop frame mode. Drop frame drops 2 frame numbers every minute, on the minute, except for every 10th minute. No picture frames are lost, and the result is that after an hour of clock time, video time will match. Editing without timecode can be done using 2 simple methods. Either you can assemble the edits one after another, or depending on the type of production, you can edit in the camera. Film schools call this cutting in the camera, and learning this technique is valuable regardless of the type of production you're creating. If you're going to edit in the camera, then you'll need to create a shot sheet. This will provide you with every shot you will use. The trick here is to plan not only the content of each shot, but the order in which the shots will appear. It's important to note that editing in the camera is a good technique for documentary shows and will not work effectively with fictional work, although it is possible to do. If you're going to assemble edit your scenes and you won't be using timecode, there are several tips you should be aware of. These will make the editing process go smoothly. Number 1. Always use a recording VCR with flying erase heads. This will allow for clean edits. Number 2, if you're using an effects device or the video toaster, fade to black or another color between important scenes. It will make the editing process smoother and give your productions a professional look. Number 3, plan your shots. Even if you aren't editing in the camera, Planning will pay off in the editing suite. Number 4, if you're going to add music or a narration track, pre-record it on tape and play it as you edit. It will help you time the show. Number 5, if you're using the video toaster or graphics software program, you can use graphic screens as transition effects. This is another way to add dimension to your video without using timecode. Scripting is also important. The screenplay is the cornerstone of any video or film. It is the basis upon which the project is created. For many people, screenwriting is a last-minute ordeal, and this is a serious mistake. If you create a story with substance, you can shoot it with inferior equipment, edit it on consumer recorders, and people will still run to see it. There are a number of important guidelines to consider when scripting. The most important one is to be worthy of your audience. If it's boring, nobody will watch. Screenwriting is an art. For this video, we will introduce you to several screenwriting concepts. The next video in this series will deal with screenwriting in detail. Every screenplay includes 3 parts: a beginning, middle, and conclusion. The beginning act will set the stage, so to speak, introduce the protagonist, define the story's conflict, and something screenwriters call time lock. A time lock refers to an event or conflict that is based in time. The film 48 Hours revolves around time lock. The middle act of a screenplay is usually based on reversals. You may think everything is going along okay when suddenly a problem crops up. Creating the middle of a film is tougher than the beginning. The final act of the screenplay will resolve and satisfy the beginning and the middle of the script. This is essential to the successful story and must not be overlooked. By the way, these elements can be applied to animation or live action. So how do you tie these sections together? The answer is simple: structure. William Goldman is an accomplished screenwriter whose credits include Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Harper, All the President's Men, Marathon Man, and the screen version of Stephen King's Misery.
The important thing about a screenplay, screenplays are not dialogue. Screenplays are structure. Screenplays are structure. That's all they are. They are structure. They are basic. Certainly dialogue is helpful. Certainly literate dialogue is pleasant. Certainly funny dialogue is fun. But the reality is the reason we can't quote many lines of dialogue, besides, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn, is because the dialogue doesn't matter that much. Obviously, good dialogue is better than inept dialogue at any time. But for the most part, you have to have the scene that is in its proper place in the structure of the piece. Let me talk about structure using 2 movies. First, I'll talk about Butch Cassidy, and then I'll talk about All the President's Men. In Butch Cassidy, opening scene of Butch Cassidy, Paul Newman goes and he looks at a bank, and it's very fortified. And he says, "What happened to the old bank? It was beautiful." And the cop says, "People kept robbing it." And Newman says, "That's a small price to pay for beauty." Okay, so understand, in that, what that scene basically is saying is, times are getting hard, okay? Now, he's riding back to his place with Sundance Kid, and he says, "Let's go to Bolivia." Now, the audience doesn't know what Bolivia is, and he says Bolivia is where there's lots of money. And he's laughed at, okay? Now, the reality is, what makes Butch different and why it was turned down by every studio the first time it was offered was they went to Bolivia, okay? I remember a studio head saying they shouldn't go to Bolivia. And I said, "But they did." And he said, "I don't give a damn what they did. All I know is John Wayne, don't run away." That's a direct quote. And he said, "If you have them stand and fight the super posse, we'll buy it." And I said, "But I can't do that. That's not what happened." Anyway, Bolivia is mentioned very early on. Now we got the jump on the cliff. They're about to get killed. The super posse has them trapped. What do they talk about? They talk about Bolivia. Butch says, "Next time I say, let's go someplace like Bolivia, let's go someplace like Bolivia." And the kid says, "Next time." Then they jump off the cliff. Etta says, "Here are all these big bad guys who are after you." Then there's a scene in which says, "We're going to Bolivia because you speak the language." Now the whole purpose of that super posse chase, which was entirely invented by me, the super posse never chased them in real life. In real life, Cassidy heard who it was and he thought, "I got to get out of here." But I couldn't do that because I had to justify why he left. I had to have the audience want him to leave. So now Bolivia is mentioned again, so that when we go to Bolivia, we've set it up from the very beginning of the picture. This is the story of two men who go to Bolivia. Western characters don't do that.
When you write a story, it's important to understand what you're writing about. Violence and sex are two themes that capture audiences. Both can be presented in a variety of ways. Sex can be explicit, and it can also be as subtle as a smile. The same is true for violence. Nightmare on Elm Street is a form of graphic violence, while All the President's Men is violence based in tension and uncertainty.
In All the President's Men, there's great material that we didn't use because the decision was made to end the movie halfway through the book on Woodward and Bernstein's screw-up on what Haldeman did and didn't know. Now, we couldn't use Judge Sirica, which is super material, which happened after that. We couldn't use a fabulous scene where they were talking to a grand jury person and it was the wrong grand jury. Terrific material. But the reality was, the structure was picking it up from the break-in and going through the moment when they made the mistake. It was the notion being that since they had become media darlings, to end on their mistake, the audience would know that they were right eventually, and rather than have them be Rudy tooting and terrific and waving the flag, to go out on that. So the structure of the piece was simply to go to that point, and also that point, the Haldeman mistake, was where Woodward and Bernstein essentially lost the story, and other people caught up with them.
Lou, you give me Mandel's number?
Yeah.
All right, listen, I want to comment up something right away, Lou. Right away, come on.
How's it going? What are you doing? Polishing a little.
You what?
Polishing.
What's wrong with it?
Nothing. It's good.
Then what are you doing with it?
I'm just helping. It's a little fuzzy.
May I have it?
I don't think you're saying what you mean.
I know exactly what I mean.
Not here. I can't tell from this whether Hunt works for Colson or Colson works for Hunt.
May I have it,
And
please?
some of your conclusions
May I
aren't
have
clear. Yes, I'm not looking for a fight.
I'm not looking for a fight either.
I'm just aware of the fact that you've only been here 9 months.
What has that got to do with anything?
Well, I've been in the business since I'm 16.
What are you saying?
Well, I'm trying to tell you that if you'd read mine and then read yours...
May I read yours?
Yeah. I walked by, gave yours a glance. It didn't look right, so I just figured I'd refine it a little. That first paragraph has to have more clarity. The reader's going to understand it. You don't mention Colson's name to the third paragraph. I think mine's better, but you go ahead and read it. If you think yours is better, we'll give yours to the desk. I got Colson's name up front. He was a White House consultant, and nobody knows
Right.
it.
Yours is better. If you're gonna do it right. Here are my notes. If you're gonna hype it with the facts. I don't mind what you did. I mind the way you did it.
So ultimately, when I say that screenplays are structure, it's simply making a spine, and you must protect that spine. There can be wonderful scenes, and if they're off the spine and you see them in a movie, they will simply die. The scenes may be well done, well shot. If they're the wrong scene, they will lay there like whales on the beach. So what you must do at all costs in a screenplay is you protect your spine. Can't say it often enough. You must decide what the spine is and protect it, keep it clear, keep it clean. You can ring in invention, you can ring in surprise, but you better damn well very clearly connect it to the spine so the audience knows where it is.
There are several methods to creating a script. This is a traditional film script. It includes the dialogue, type of shot, and the character speaking or performing an action. For video work, you'll want to use a different format, such as this. This is WordPerfect for the Amiga. Notice the two-column format. The left column has dialogue, while the right column lists the visuals of the show. Sometimes, a script can be written in a semi-standard format, like this. If you're going to work with other people, it's important that you learn the standards of screenwriting and apply them to your project. It's also important to note that these screenwriting issues can be applied to both fictional and non-fictional videos. And here are tips to consider when creating a script. Number 1, Start with an outline. Number 2, create master scenes and build around them. Number 3, get to the point. Don't get sidetracked. Number 4, take elements from real life whenever possible. Number 5, build believable characters. Don't get wild. Number 6, avoid long speeches. Rhythm is critical to every video. Storyboards. Often, this is an excellent method of showing other people what's going on in your head. If you're hiring a crew, then storyboards are vital. If you're making your own film and you are the crew, then you may not need to use them. If you're going to create storyboards, you can use a program like Deluxe Paint 4. Don't worry about being an artist. When creating storyboards, the key is showing people the point of view or perspective of the scene. Stick figures might be enough to get your point across. If you're really ambitious, you can even animate your storyboards. Using a camera has 2 functions. First of all, you're capturing the scene. Without a camera, there is no story. Secondly, you're bringing people into the scene. The camera is an eye, a brain, a heart, an object. As a result, a camera used in the wrong way can ruin a scene and lessen the effect the director was trying to create. Let's take a look at some camera techniques and their effect on a scene. First of all, here is a basic full shot. We're shooting a building from across the street. We're using a zoom lens in the wide angle mode. Now, let's put the camera low down and shoot up. Notice the effect you've created? Power, dominance, and position are everything to the camera. Now let's move a bit further away from the building and use the zoom lens to change the effect of the scene. When compared to the first image, this one is clearly different. In this case, we've changed the perspective of the scene.
It's really important just to find a good lens angle and hold that and let the scene develop the way it's going to happen, rather than the cameraman trying to overuse his technique and then making the audience become aware of, what he's doing. You got to be subtle. It's a little stealthy sometimes. If I had a friend that bought a high quality consumer camera like a Hi8 or Super VHS, some of the suggestions I would make for getting the most out of it would be, firstly, probably use a tripod whenever possible. Learn to use a tripod. Learn when it's to your advantage to get steady shots. And when I'm shooting things professionally, I probably use a tripod about 90% of the time.
As an option to the tripod, there is another device called the Steadicam. This device is expensive, heavy, and requires a lot of experience to use. For DTV, there's a special version called the Steadicam Junior. This version will work with almost any camcorder weighing less than 5 pounds. When using it, you can get fantastic results, including smooth moves and pans. Although it requires some practice as well, learning to use the Steadicam can make your productions look like you've spent some serious money. Perhaps the most important thing to learn about camera work is to make the camera invisible. For most movies, you don't want the viewer to realize there's a camera being used at all. The key is to draw the audience into the scene, making the camera the eye of the viewer. Learn this, and you can work anywhere, guaranteed.
My facility is a small facility. It's in my home. I do a certain level of work here. I do what's called online. I finished production of something, walks out here, it's done. It doesn't need to do anything else to it. Or I do what's called offline, which is in essence creating a work tape and an edit list that represents all of the editing that will be done on a higher end system from sources that are higher end than my work tapes that I've been working with.
Well, this is a basic offline system. It's called a ECS Super 90, which is a time code based system. I use half-inch decks. These are the JVC industrial decks. They have audio for channel 1 and channel 2 on the linear tracks. On channel 2, we put the SMPTE time code. I don't know if you can read that, but as it scrolls through, it's reading the time code location on the record side. This is the source deck over here, and same information on channel 2 of that. So the way the basic system works is you just decide where you want an endpoint on the tape you're assembling. Let's say right in the middle of this person's speech, and where you want to put, in this case, an insert shot of some cars driving by. So I'm just entering on the fly in and out points like that, and I can go into a preview mode. Backs it up 5 seconds pre-roll, so both machines roll in sync, and so the edit point will come exactly at the point you've selected.
Given position location, that leads in turn to other things.
So I'm going to make some adjustments to the shot. I have it come out at that point. I can also enter time code via the keypad here, the exact time code number I might want to use off my source side. Preview that one again. Both machines have rolled back 5 seconds before the edit point, then they'll click in, roll together.
Digital technology will greatly enhance the basic car phone, but it also opens the door
That's
to
where the edit
digital
takes
data
place.
transmission and the fantastic future.
When
I like that edit, so now I'll go ahead and perform the edit. At the same time, I'll turn on my edit list decision processor, the serial
Digital
port, to
technology
receive
will
the
greatly enhance the basic car phone, but it also opens the door to digital
editing
data
information.
transmission and the fantastic future.
when
and then the information will come across over here, and now it's in the list.
If you're going to do an online, you don't want to walk into the online unprepared. And I mean by this, the full reason of doing an offline to walk into an online with a list is so that the list is clean. This is the first consideration. The online editor doesn't know what you've done. He has to rely that that list is clean. Otherwise, he's going to try to figure out with you what went wrong. I've been very fortunate in the fact that most of the time I walk into online situations, in the experience levels that I've had, my lists are very clean. And this is what you should strive to do. You do not want to have your producer spend all kinds of money in online. And so this is the critical part, is preparing ahead of time, both for your offline session, okay, meaning ahead of what you're doing, and during the offline for the online. How do you do that? Real quickly, is your offline editor should converse with your online editor or somebody at the facility to know the machinery that they have, what kind of programming they're going to need. In other words, are they using Grass Valley or Convergence or CMX or whatever it is, so that when this list comes over there, it's on the right format, whether it's MS-DOS or CMX or whatever it is, so that when it's loaded into their machine, it loads right in and we don't have problems. As an offline editor, you need to understand the workings of whatever format you're going to go to. If it's CMX, then you have to know how your list needs to be to make the conversion to CMX if you're not offlining on CMX. And I don't offline on CMX, I offline on Convergence, but I know how to translate it over to put out a CMX list through my software and to have it look right to them over there so that they don't run into problems with split edits or some crazy nomenclature that I've done that really makes a problem for them in their lists.
Now let's take the edit process one step further. We're going to use the video toaster as a switcher using a single video source. This will be the most common arrangement for desktop producers. Although there is only one video source, there are 2 frame buffers and a background that can be used to create effects and transitions. Video noise is very popular these days, so let's set that up as our background. Click on the noise icon and then on OK. Now, set up the sequence you want to record. click on Video Input 1 in Preview and on Background in Program. This means you will transition from noise to the video sequence you've selected. Now, let's select a transition. For this move, let's try a dissolve. Click on the Dissolve crouton. By the way, there are 3 speeds to choose from when creating transitions: slow, medium, and fast. If you don't find a speed that suits your fancy, the T-bar can be moved manually. Let's select medium. Now, set up the scene to record and execute the edit. At the proper moment, click on the Auto button, and voila! Transition completed. Here's an example of the same scene with some other transitions selected. By using the background and the frame buffers of the toaster, you can add depth and continuity to a single video source production. Deluxe Paint 4 is Electronic Arts' most recent release of their best-selling paint program for the Amiga. One of the more powerful things that can be done with Deluxe Paint is animating titles. Titles are key elements of any video, and there are a host of available fonts for titling with Deluxe Paint and other programs. Cara Fonts is one of the most popular lines, and this set of fonts, called Font City from Allied Studios, is gaining in popularity. You can simply place fonts like this, or for more impressive results, you can merge the fonts onto other graphics, like this. One of the more dramatic capabilities of Deluxe Paint 4 is its ability to morph one image into another. Ray Masters is an accomplished Amiga artist and animator who uses D-Paint in his work every day. The ability to morph objects opens new doors for Ray.
Being exposed to anybody that has had more experience than you in any areas is always a great eye-opener. For the average, whether you're in a business or you're just a home computer artist, to be able to look over the shoulders of artists such as myself or Siegel or Sachs is, I think, one of the most wonderful things about our video age, is that we can get these first-hand experiences, save ourselves. I mean, it's taken me 5 years to learn certain things. I'm going to teach you that in 1 minute. Let's say that I want to take the letter R of Ray Masters Productions in a video title, or actually let's make the whole thing Ray. And I want to take that word Ray and I want to change that on my title page to say another word, let's say call. It might be that the first page will be saying Ray Masters Productions, and the second page will say call and a phone number. So here are 2 words which, as you can imagine, to change in any kind of animation, single frame animation, single cell animation, would be a very, very laborious job and a very difficult job from the standpoint that how do you actually imagine these words changing one to another? Enter the morph program. Now, I'm actually using a very weird example here in words. Most people would want to say change a square into a ball. I'm using this because it's very different and it will show you the limitations, if you like, to the morph. What we first have to do is pick both of these, should I say, the arrival and the destination parts of our transition up as brushes. So first of all, we'll pick up Ray as a brush. Now, crop very closely. When you're morphing in this program does not like to morph large brushes. We're almost on the edge where we are. The simpler the brush, the better the morph, the cleaner the morph as well. So here we have our first brush. Now we'll press Alt-B and then B, and that will tell us that we're going in for our second brush, and again we'll clip this quite close. What you should actually endeavor to do is to create 2 brushes that are very similar size. I'm doing this on purpose to show you the side effects of not doing that. When the brushes are very similar size, the morph is that much cleaner and crisper. Okay, we now have 2 brushes. We can show that. Here's one brush. Let's press Alt-B again, And there's our second brush. Okay, let's return to our last brush. That's where we want to end up. Now we come up into Morph, and we bring up Morph either from our top menu here, we go into Spare and Metamorph, or as you can see here, the alternative is to press Alt-M, and a much quicker way of doing it. Our requester has come up to ask us, make anim brush number of cells 5. Now I'm going to use this in video. I want the animation to last approximately half a second. In that case, as video shows 30 frames a second, I want my animation to last 15 frames or half a video second. So I punch in 15 and OK, and leave it up to the computer to take me from A to B, which it will do. Okay, I now have an anim brush, which is a morph from the word ray to the word call. I actually want to now save this as an animation, because what I would be doing is I would be making up a screen full of words. Now I can't grab that whole screen and morph the whole screen at once. There just isn't the power in this particular element of the software machine interface. So what I would do in my case is I'm going to grab the words independently and just show you how we would do this. So let's go up to animation and call up, and let's start an animation, and we will select the amount of frames that we require, and in this case we'll make that 15 frames. Press OK. So now I'm going to stamp this anim brush down and create a 15 frame animation. One very easy way to do this is to select the move requester by pressing Shift M. We don't want the brush to go anywhere, so we're not going to change any of our angles or our movements. We just want the brush to stay exactly where it is. So first of all, we stamp it down into frame 1, Shift M to bring up the move requester, and just go straight into draw. And at that point, our anim brush will just repeatedly stamp itself down frame by frame on the 15 frames that we come up with. What we do now is we go on and create the rest of the words on the title page, stamping them down individually in order to keep the memory requirements as we need them. Okay, let's just run that through by pressing number 4 on the keyboard. We'll send the animation into action. This is a bit fast, so we'll slow the whole proceedings down a bit with the arrow keys. Actually, let's stop that by pressing spacebar and go into ping pong, which is this from one to the other, and you can see the whole thing happening much easier. So we have ray going into call. Now obviously what I'd want to do here is I'd want the ray and the call to stay on screen more, so I'd simply go in there and add frames to the tail and the end of that particular animation. But that's a very simple way of seeing what a very powerful tool Morph is. I mean, there's no way that you could have, anybody could have thought up how that morph should look so smooth as the computer has done it.
The video toaster includes a titling package called a character generator, or CG for short. The toaster is capable of generating broadcast quality font output, and once again, this feature alone is worth the entire price of the toaster to serious video files. There are a number of fonts being released specifically for use in the toaster. One of the things the toaster does well is climbs and crawls. The motion is smooth, and the definition of the fonts over live video is excellent. When creating titles with the toaster, keep some important guidelines in mind. Number 1, don't use too many fonts. Number 2, use color to highlight or for continuity. Number 3, rolling credits are good for the end of shows. Number 4, crawls are best for informational effects. Number 5, don't mix crawls and rolls. Number 6, don't roll credits too quickly. Give people enough time to read the credits. To learn more about titling with the Video Toaster, take a look at the Video Toaster video, produced by Raza Video. Backdrops are another key link to a professional-looking video. Backdrops are good for titles and for keying product or people over for an arty look. There are a number of backdrop products available for the toaster and for other Amiga programs. Let's take a look at some of those backdrops and what you can do with them.
I don't know how to create a lot of things like real artists do, but because of the Amiga and its video capabilities and these third-party software items that come into usage and products that you can draw from in library usage, I know how to piece together things that have been created already and can do a little creativity, okay, and learn more as I go along to just draw on these libraries and create a new look. For example, if you take a look at our Oriental slate composite, which happens to be one that's sitting over here on my screen at the moment. This consists of one of our textures in the background, which you can take a look at as a bamboo textured background. In front of it, there is a cutout piece of handmade paper. That's one of our handmade paper textures. All of our screens are full screen, but I wanted to have a layered look and see both things on the screen at the same time. So I took one of our papers and I put it in toaster paint, and I cut out an irregular shape, and I created this shape, and through the use of compositing in a program called Art Department Professional, and using a little bit of clip art, a bonsai tree piece, I composited these things together to result in a slate that has an area to do titling on top of that relates to something I wanted to do. And it gave it a very dimensional look with a drop shadow and a really photorealistic look that went way beyond anything I could basically paint in, let's say, a limited color paint program. I definitely couldn't pull this off in a 16 color. I'm not capable enough. For example, Cara might be able to pull off a 16 color imaging situation because of her talents, but this is something I could do. And for those video people who are not computer artists, but can learn how to use a computer in simplicity and relate it to their video knowledge, this is a godsend, just like the other clip art programs that are out there or libraries that are out there.
It's your world.
Music is very important to videos of all kinds and vital to an exciting DTV production. There are 3 types of sound used in videos, including voice, music, and sound effects. Let's take a look at a piece of video without any music. Now, let's play that same piece back and add in some music. As you can see, adding music can make or break your production.
I think that the musical elements and the sound elements in any video are as important as the visual elements. A good music score can double the effect of an animation. Even in the simplest animations I make, the test animations, the animations I show my friends, buddies in my Amiga user group, always go out with some type of music attached to them.
It's coming into its own now where people realize that audio is 50% of the ballgame. I can make my viewer do things when he watches or she watches this program by the type of sound system I'm using, meaning not so much quality of level of the sound, which is very important, but what are they listening to? Are they listening to driving music or calm music? I can motivate, I can manipulate, I can control people's emotion by using audio correctly. And I can enhance a rather dull presentation with audio to give it the spark it needs, to bring back interest all of a sudden, to calm people down, to make them focused on areas by using audio effectively.
Sound effects are another important element for DTV productions. There are 2 primary ways to gather sound effects. You can record your own, or you can purchase a sound effects cassette or compact disc. These sound effects discs were purchased in retail stores for less than $10 each. With an average of 100 sounds per disc, that represents a good value. When adding sound effects, there are several options available to you. If you're recording a mono show, you can place the sound effect on an unused audio track as an insert edit or an audio overdub. One step that should be taken is to record your audio effects onto videotape. Once the effects are on videotape, you can select them with frame accuracy. If you're creating a stereo show, then the process becomes a bit more complex. For this type of situation, we suggest you consider an audio mixer. There are a variety of mixers on the market, ranging in price from less than $100 to many thousands of dollars for a professional unit. This is the Tascam 644 MIDI Studio. This mixer is excellent for work with video, as it allows a variety of sources to be mixed into a stereo master tape, which is on board. Unlike typical cassette recorders, the MIDI Studio creates amazing audio output. With a mixer like the MIDI Studio, you can record a series of effects, background music, and even narration onto an audio cassette, then transfer the data onto videotape for a final product. Getting an original soundtrack scored for a video can be expensive. There is an easy-to-use alternative. Music libraries are available from a variety of sources and include almost every type of music ever created. Turn on your television and watch 30 minutes of TV. Almost every commercial will include music from a library. There are several discs available from the Capitol Music Library. You can select jazz, classical, rock, pop, fusion, and even rap styles. Another popular library comes from Associated Production Music. When you buy into a library, you are usually charged by the amount of music you use. Often, this is called a needle drop, from the days when people used records and dropped a needle to begin play.
Music libraries are probably the simplest way to get effective audio in a music context onto your video and the least costly. I mean, obviously, you're not going to hire the Philharmonic to play something for you or write something for you, unless you can afford that type of thing. There are many music libraries out on the market, and they're in twofold areas. One is called buyout, and the other is just a licensing situation. And that's broken down into two kind of groups. Licensing by needle drop, or usage per each individual cut of music used, or buying it over a year's time, called an annual license. There are many good buyout libraries on the market right now. In years past, that hadn't been true. They had been dated music, or people that just didn't have a flair for current contemporary sounds or even archival sounds. It's changing. There are good buyouts out there. You have got to do your research and homework, though, because you can buy libraries that would date you immediately, and your producers would say, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. There are wonderful licensing libraries out there, and there are a lot of them, and there are more coming as competition rises. And they are libraries that can go from archival sounds that you may need for documentary work all the way up to current rap and pop and hip hop and whatever you need. So they vary in price depending on how you're going to go about looking at them. And they vary in usage, whether you're making a for sale video or a non-broadcast corporate video, or making, for example, something to go on network or cable. So price structuring varies depending on usage.
This is Lightwave 3D. This is what Lightwave 3D can create. As an integral part of NewTek's video toaster, Lightwave is worth the price of admission alone. Brent Malnack is an experienced Lightwave artist and one-time NewTek employee. His Lightwave animations are appearing around the world.
Lightwave is different from other animation packages because it is easy to use. It is one of the easiest packages for someone with no 3D experience to get up and get started experimenting with 3D. And the sophisticated rendering techniques that it has and the good quality of the toaster output make it a very competitive package to the higher-end standalone 3D systems.
This is the world of 3 dimensions. That means that you need to think in 3D so you can create objects and scenes that will look realistic. Let's take a look at a cube. There are 3 axes to the cube, X, Y, and Z. The trick to understanding 3D is this. The 3 axes intersect at a point, say the leading edge of this cube. It is around these axes that the cube can be rotated. Rotation around the Y-axis is called heading. Rotation around the X-axis is called pitch. And rotation around the Z-axis is called bank. If you're going to animate, you'll need objects. This video will introduce you to the animation portion of Lightwave. The next tape in this series will discuss the modeler. There are a few things you should know about objects before we continue.
The steps involved in creating an animation begin with determining what objects are to be used in the animation, and from that point, if it's a logo animation, you create the logo and you use it. If it is a realistic scene, you need to either create all the objects in the scene, or at times you can purchase pre-constructed objects such as furniture and plants to put into your scene. The next step is selecting surface and texture information for the objects. This can be setting whether an object is shiny or not, whether it's got a wood texture or marble texture. With Lightwave, the possibilities are endless. You can take a texture map from a grabbed freeze frame of video and put it on the surface of an object as well. So it's very flexible from that standpoint. And after the surfaces and textures have been selected, the next process is creating the motion files. And this is done simply by placing the camera and lights and determining where objects need to be at different points in the animation.
We're going to render a 30-second animation. We've already set the scene to 30 frames, and we're ready to load an object. Click on the Lightwave crouton on the switcher panel. Once the main panel loads, click on Objects. Shortly afterward, the Objects control panel will load. Click on Load Object. At this point, you'll see a variety of objects to choose from. Let's select a chess piece. Let's move to the Layout screen. Click on Layout. The Layout panel will allow you to control the motion of camera, object, light, and workspace. Click on Object. Now move to the Scene Layout window and click anywhere on the object. As you move the mouse, the object will move. By clicking on Camera, you can move around from the camera's perspective. Moving the light can create effects such as a setting sun or a light being turned on. Let's set up the object, camera, and light. Click on a Create Keyframe in the Animation Control panel. A requester will appear asking if it's okay to start at 0. It is, so click on OK. Click on Camera. Now let's move the camera a bit. Let's click on Light. Move the light as well. Now click on Go to Frame. Move the frame count up to 15. Now click on Create Key. Let's move the camera some more. Notice that you have infinite control over the camera, lights, and the object itself. Click on Go to Frame once more. Change the frame number to 30 before clicking on OK. Click on Create Key. Now, let's take a look at what we've done. Click on Make Preview. The computer will work calculating the moves of the various objects, camera, and lights. You can see the animation evolving and the frame count changing as the computer creates a preview. Now click on Play Preview. You can play the animation preview back at 1, 15, or 30 frames per second. You can also control the motion from start to finish, or the reverse of that. Once you're happy with the preview, you're ready to render the animation to tape or disc.
Determining how long it's going to take to render an animation is kind of hard to do. The time can vary depending on the resolution and the complexity of the scene and how close the camera is to objects. And there are so many variables that it's very hard to determine how long an animation is going to take to render. Some general rules of thumb are that each time you go up to the next higher resolution in light wave, it takes 4 times as long as the previous resolution. So it's best to start off and do a test render of a low resolution frame and then multiply that times 4 for your high resolution time and times 4 again for your anti-alias time.
If you're going to render the animation to tape, you'll need a single frame controller. Companies such as Lion Lamb make a variety of single frame controllers for professional use. These devices aren't inexpensive, so learn about the various options prior to making a commitment. There are also some new controllers that are software-based, such as the personal frame controller seen here. This system does use some simple hardware, but relies on the Amiga system for the core of its intelligence. This system can be had for less than $500. Frame controllers are an excellent method of putting lightwave animations onto tape. There are alternatives. However, in order to get a top-quality animation, it is important to use a frame-accurate recorder. There are a number of units on the market that don't cost an arm and a leg to purchase, including the Sony EVO 9700 and the EVO 9850. The secret to rendering without a frame controller is to render lightwave frames to disk. You can use a hard disk to capture your frames, but you better have some space. A 10-second animation can take up more than 300 megabytes. Our suggestion is to use a removable system, such as this SyQuest drive. You can render 40 frames to each cartridge, and it's easy to move from one machine to another. Define how you want the frames saved in the Record Control panel and set the render mode to auto. This type of rendering system is also good for time management. You can set the system up to record a set of frames at night while you're away from the system. In the morning, the frames will be ready to lay to tape. Virtual reality is a new term that is shaking up the desktop video industry. There are a variety of virtual products for the Amiga, such as Scenery Animator and Vista Pro, that permit you to render objects and terrain as never before. Jim Carrey uses virtual reality in his desktop video productions and is finding new horizons for the technique every day.
A friend of mine named Lee Douglas was the producer-director on a music video. She had seen some of the experimentation I was doing with 3D landscapes and fractals and incorporated them into the storyboard for her music video. She wanted something surreal. She was dealing with different ethnic themes. One of them was shamanistic, Indian shamanistic rituals where an Indian might change himself to an eagle and fly. So she wanted to have her Indian actually fly through a surreal landscape. So I took Vista Pro, I loaded in a map from Mars, added a lake, a little bit of unusual skyline, and made a path for it, and then we overlaid her flying Indian over the Vista Pro landscape. For years I've had dreams about flying. suddenly on my computer in front of me, I could realize these dreams, create a landscape either from my imagination or load in a landscape that existed somewhere in the United States and actually fly through it.
All sides are the same side. All sides are the same side. I like it. I like it. All sides are the same side. All sides are the same side. I like it. I like it.
DCTV is a complete and powerful desktop video device. Basically, an external 24-bit output device, DCTV can be used to create original art, touch up images captured from videotape, or to output graphics and animations from the Amiga in 24-bit form. DCTV works with two monitors. You'll need your Amiga monitor and an NTSC monitor for your output. There is no way to preview your work on the Amiga display. Let's take a brief look at the DCTV Paint. The Paint palette has three primary sections, including the color wells, where you select colors, the toolbar at the top of the panel, and the mixing area, where you can combine multiple colors as an artist would. The current selected color is displayed on the far left of the panel. Let's select a few colors and mix them. Grab a red. Brush it on a bit. Now let's grab a yellow. That's interesting, but let's get weird. Grab a green. Andy Warhol lives. Now let's take a look at the brush panel. This panel has three sections as well, including paint modes on the left, brush controls, and brush shapes. This is a good time to mention that these types of controls give DCTV its power. The paint modes are very powerful. You can tint, shade, or create watercolor effects. Since the output of DCTV is 24-bit, the images work well in a broadcast environment. DCTV is especially valuable for titling and stenciling. We'll learn about some of DCTV's advanced features in Amiga Graphics Volume 2. Advanced animation is something every desktop video producer yearns to master. When you see sophisticated animations from masters such as Alan Hastings, Jim Robinson, or Brent Malneck, it's easy to become intimidated. You'd be surprised to learn how easy certain advanced elements to animation can be. Let's step into Jim Carrey's Desert Sky Studios for an inside look at animating with Deluxe Paint 4.
Well, one thing nice about Deluxe Paint is the animation brush capability and the move requesters, and I use both of those extensively to do my animations, especially this so-called rotating globe that I've used in quite a few of my projects now. So I'll just walk through a very simple little system I've come up with. So I've loaded in a simple flat map of the world. I got this off of a PD disk somewhere, and I cleaned it up and took out the oceans, so I just have the continents. So the first thing I want to do is pick this up as a brush. And I also want to pick up a certain size. I want to make my entire brush a certain size. In this case, I'm going to make the whole brush 480 pixels in width. And 240 high. I'm going to clear my screen. I'm going to set my frames, the number of frames I'm going to animate with, to 80. And then I'm going to move. I'm going to set this down. There's a few things I do to ensure that there's smooth animation. One of them is I decide ahead of time how big the animation brush is going to be, and I usually make that an even amount of pixels, and later on that's easier to divide. So in this case, when I pick this up, I'm going to make a brush that's 480 pixels wide and 240 pixels high. So I'll go ahead and pick up this globe. I'm using, my background color is set to black, so when I pick this up, the background will be transparent. So I got 480 by 240 right there. Pick that up. I'm going to clear that. And then I'll pull up the Deluxe Paint 4 Move Requester, which is what I think is the most powerful feature of the whole Deluxe Paint series. Deluxe Paint 3 had it, Deluxe Paint 4 has it. It's the Move Requester in Deluxe Paint 4 is basically the same as Deluxe Paint 3, which is fine with me because I had no faults with it in the first place. So I pick up the Move Requester, and I'm going to animate my continents now. I'm just going to move it from right to left, and I want to move it a certain amount of pixels, and I want those pixels from frame to frame to be the same amount, and that way my animation will be smooth. So what I need to do is just move it in multiples of the number of frames. In this case, I'm animating for 80 frames, so if I wanted to move one pixel at a time, it would be an 80 frame move, which wouldn't move it far enough. In this case, I want it to move all the way off the screen, so I'm going to move it 480 frames, which means every frame has a 6 pixel move. So I've got my count set at 80. I go up to the distance it's going to move, and I set it to minus 480 in the X direction. So it's going to move from right to left 480 frames and 480 pixels in 80 frames. And I can preview that to see how it's going to go. And it looks like it's doing it fine. So I'll cancel the preview. And then I'll just go ahead and tell it to draw it. I've set the direction of the motion forward, and I just hit draw, and it'll go ahead and animate that. All right, now the Move Requester has animated my continents over 80 frames, 480 pixels. If I go into the animation mode, you can see what that looks like. So that's my animation. I'll go back to the first frame. I'll recall my brush again, and now I'm going to do the second half of this animated effect, and I'm going to put relay the first frame so it's exactly identical to the first frame of my previous animation. I just click down on top, pull up the Move Requester. I'm going to move the same amount of frames, but this time I don't want it to move from right to left. I want it to move I don't want it to move from center to off screen. I want it to move from off screen on the right to center. So in the direction requester down here, I tell it to move to the location I just selected, not from the location. And then I can preview it, and I can see that now it's going to come in, and it's going to stop right where it started. And in a moment, this will all make sense about what I'm doing here. I'm basically setting up an animation that I'm going to pick up as an animation brush and fill into a globe in just a minute. So these are the steps. When this is done and it's played as an animation, it'll just look like a continuous loop now of continents going by. I've come across this system just through trial and error. In the beginning, I used to make these globes, and I'd pick up every frame one at a time, and then I discovered one day that the Move Requester would do all the mathematics for me, all the motion for me. I just had to do a simple little math in my head practically, and let the computer do all the work. All right, now once again, using the keyboard, I punch 4, which is the forward animation mode, and as you can see, I just have a looping routine of the continents. It would just go on forever. Okay, I'll go back to frame 1. Now I use the pickup animation brush requester. Go up here, select pickup. It asks me the number of frames I want to pick up, which is an excellent new routine that Deluxe Paint 4 had, that Deluxe Paint 3 didn't, that I can just pick up sections of an animation. In Deluxe Paint 3, you had to pick up all the frames that were there, and you had to come up with all kinds of workarounds if you just wanted to pick up 16 frames out of an 80-frame animation. In this case, I want all 80 frames, so I say, yeah, I'll select 80 frames. Now, I have the size of my original brushes, you recall, was 480. I'm going to put this in a globe, so I only want to see half of the world at once. So I'm going to pick up a 240 frame animation brush. As you might have missed before, you can toggle the coordinates on and off with the keyboard toggle, so I use these extensively. I just look up in the corner there, see what I'm doing, so I select, kind of eyeball what I want to pick up, and then I just select half, which is 240 frames of what I'd laid down before, and I'll go ahead and I'll do 240 frames wide by 240 frames high. I'm satisfied I got it. I just let it go, and now it's going to go for 80 frames and pick it up. And as you see, what I'm doing is just selecting 80 frames of a half of a scrolling globe. This will be the front half of my rotating globe. It'll take a second here. Any artwork will work with this. Anything you want to wrap around a globe will work, and it doesn't have to be a globe. You can wrap it into a cone, any shape that could rotate. And this is when this is done, you'll see it comes out looking like 3D, but of course I'm in a 2D program, so this is like 2.5D. It's tricks to make it look like 3D. All right, now I can go ahead and clear my animation because I don't need this anymore. The new Deluxe Paint 4 Clear Requester is nice because I can just clear any number of frames from 1 to the total amount of frames I have in my animation. In this case, I'll go ahead and clear all 80 frames, and it clears it to the background color I have selected over there. All right, so now I have an animation brush, and I can cycle through the animation brush, and you can see what it looks like. And it's just a square face of a globe. So now I have a square globe. The next step is to make it look round. And once again, I use Deluxe Paint's fill request, or what Deluxe Paint's powerful animation features, which this time will be in its fill requester. I select the fill requester, which basically is just with the right mouse button on the fill. I could also select it from the keyboard equivalent, and I select wrap. So that'll take the brush that I'm currently using and wrap it into any shape. So I select, I've purposely in my palette made 3 colors in there that I can use that are outside of the color of my actual animation, that are not included in the palette of my animation, that I can just use it for effects that I'm going to do and then clean them out later and not affect the actual palette. So then I just make a globe. Not a globe, I just make a circle. Then I copy that circle to all the frames in my animation, and in the Deluxe Paint 4 requester it has a copy frames. Once again, Deluxe Paint 4 allows you to be very specific about the frames you're copying, what frames you're copying and where you're copying them to. In this case, I'm going to take my current frame, copy them to all the frames, but I could copy the current frame to frames 40 through 80. In this case, I'll just do all the frames. So now, if I cycle through it, I'm in frame 7. They all have the same globe. Okay, go back to frame 1. Make sure I have the right brush selected, which is my animation brush. And through a keyboard equivalent, gets me back to frame 1 of that animation brush. I'm just going to double check to make sure that I'm still in wrap, and I am. And then, and this is the real magic, by pressing the left Amiga key and the Alt key, it's going to automatically wrap that animation brush, 80 frames of moving animation, onto 80 frames of the globe. It takes a little while, but it's very fast when you consider I used to do this by hand, one at a time. Pick up a section of a map, move it over, place it down in the globe, go back, pick up a section of the map, place it in the globe, until I discovered that I could let the computer, with the LexPaint 4 software, just to do the whole thing for me. If you watch what's happening here, it's just going through each frame of the animation brush and laying it down. At the same time, it's wrapping it onto wrapping it into a circle. All right, so now I've laid down 80 frames of my animation brush inside this circle, and as you can see, because of the brush wrap, it has distorted the image, so now it looks like it's round. So what I need to do now is, first of all, get rid of my purple circle here that I used to enclose the globe, and I do that with the background to foreground requester. So I select the color that I want to get rid of as my background color, and I select the color I want it to become, in this case the rest of the background color, as a foreground, and then in the color requester I tell it background equals foreground. I'll tell it the current frame to make sure it's going to work, and it erases it, and then I'll do it again over all 80 frames, and it'll go through and do that. Yeah, we've taken the circle away now, and I've picked up that entire animation as a brush. So that brush, if we step through it one frame at a time, you can see it's a rotating globe with transparent oceans. Incidentally, I'm using I use the same routine for this particular globe you see on the screen, this animation brush, but I have added some sparkle star effects for the client. In this case, it was Apollo tires, to show where they go to actually pick up rubber for their tires, which was what the purpose of this rotating globe was for. All right. Now, so at this point, I would lay down my globe. And you can put an animation brush down once again with the move requester. In this case, I'm going to tell it I don't want it to move anywhere. I just want it to cycle through 80 frames and draw itself down in place. It already looks a little 3D, but I want it to look very 3D, so I want to add a backside to this globe. I already have the same globe that we animated, still held as an animation brush. Now I use another powerful feature of the LexPaint, and that's to flip the entire animation brush. We all know that you can pick up, and I'll go do it, I'll pick up just a single brush, and with the keystroke equivalent of brush flip, I can flip it back and forth, up and down. In this case, I want to flip it on its x-axis. So I just hit X, and it's going to do it for me. It's going to take about 5 minutes to do, so go get a cup of coffee of it as it does it. Nice thing about the LexPaint 4 now is that it shows you what it's doing, so at least you know something's going on. The LexPaint 3, it would do animation brush flips, but all you would get is a little sleeping cursor. Okay, now I've flipped my brush, so if I step through it with the keyboard here, you can see the animation that I previously laid down is now rotating from left to right, which would be the right way if you think about the sun coming up in the east and setting in the west. And the brush that I just flipped, if I step through the animation, it's animating from right to left, which is the opposite of the way the globe should be. Using the palette requester, I take one of the colors that I used before, and one of the colors that I selected to be not included in my earth tones, and I select, say, a neutral gray color. Okay, and I choose that color as my foreground, and then using the mode requesters, I select color, which takes everything in the brush and makes it whatever the current foreground color is. So I'm on frame 1 of the animation itself. So the back side of the globe has to be exactly halfway on the other side of that, and since I have 80 frames, that would be frame 40. So using the animation brush requester in the setting mode, I go to the settings, and you can actually specify the frame, the current frame. So I specify frame number 41. And now I'm going to lay the back side of my globe down, but I do not want it to go over the foreground, so using the stencil requester, I select the background color, invert it, make it, and now my globe will only paint, my new globe will only paint over the sections that are black. Before, when I laid down my foreground globe, I wrote down the coordinate numbers, which in this case happen to be 268 in the X position and 185 in the Y. And then I stamp my brush down there. Go once again to the move requester, tell it to stamp the brush down 80 times in succession. All right, so now Deluxe Paint 4 has laid down 80 frames of my animation brush in succession. This was the brush that we flipped on its y-axis. And in flipping it, it reversed the motion. And we put it down using the stencil so it did not color over the foreground globe. We go into the animation mode, and as you can see now your mind tricks you into thinking you're looking at an entire 3D globe, looking through it and seeing the back side of it.
As you can see, learning to become an Amiga animation expert is only a few hours away. Don't forget that experimenting is vital to opening new doors for your graphics and animation techniques. Don't be afraid to try new things. If you're creative, you'll find a niche that suits your style and productions. Guaranteed. Now for the good stuff. Here are some tips that can make your video productions a work of art. Direct from the home office, the top 10 tips for professional productions. Number 10, always create an outline of your project and stick to it. Number 9, get to the point. Be specific and don't let your audience guess about your motives. Number 8, use fade to black or another color between key scenes. Number 7, use title pages between segments of documentary shows. Number 6, watch television and movies all the time. There's no better source for technique. Number 5, always use an accelerator with the video toaster. Number 4, rent production equipment whenever possible or reasonable. Number 3, license a music library. Don't steal music. Number 2, push your creativity with each new show. Take risks. And number 1, don't be boring. If it's safe, it's boring. Be creative. You should now have a good understanding of the various elements involved in creating a desktop video. Amiga Graphics Volume 2 will focus on high-end graphics systems and outputting to videotape. Desktop Video Volume 3 will take you through the complete production of a video project and includes exercises you can execute with your equipment. Be prepared to build a show with animation, titling, location shooting, narration, music, sound effects, and more. And always remember, if it's a good story, then people will want you to tell it. It's the foundation upon which desktop video is based.